Claude Sawyer could not sleep. For 3 nights running, as the SS Waratah crossed the Indian Ocean from Australia toward South Africa, the same dream had found him in his bunk and shaken him awake. A figure rose from the sea ahead of the ship, a man in strange clothing that Sawyer had never seen before, dressed in what looked like ancient armor. In one hand, the figure held a long sword pointed directly at Sawyer. In the other hand, it held a rag soaked in blood, which it thrust toward him, as if trying to deliver a message that words could not carry. The figure said nothing. It simply stood on the water, sword raised, bloody cloth extended, staring at Sawyer through the dark. Then it vanished, and Sawyer woke up drenched in sweat, alone in his cabin, listening to the groaning of a ship he was increasingly certain was going to kill everyone aboard. On July 25, 1909, when the Waratah docked at Durban, South Africa, Claude Sawyer gathered his belongings and got off. He had been booked through to London. He had no business in Durban. He had no reason to leave the ship other than a nightmare and a feeling in his gut that would not go away. Before he left, he tried to warn others. He told his bunkmate, a solicitor named John Ebsworth, who was traveling to London to defend a client. Ebsworth acknowledged the dream was disturbing, but he decided to stay. Sawyer spoke to a woman named Alexandra Hay, who was traveling with her daughter. Mrs. Hay was shocked by the story, but she was not going to change ships. Sawyer pleaded with the ship's captain, Joshua Ilbery. Ilbery dismissed him. Sawyer walked down the gangway in Durban, and he sent a telegram to his wife that said, "Thought Waratah top heavy. Landed Durban. Claude." He later booked passage on the Kildonan Castle to Cape Town, and from there on the steamer Galician back to England. He arrived home alive. Alexandra Hay and her daughter Helen, who had listened to Sawyer's warning and chosen to stay, did not. Mrs. Hay was from Coventry, England. Her daughter was known to everyone as Dolly. They had been traveling together, a mother and daughter, on a journey that should have brought them home. The Hay family had already suffered one catastrophe that year. Their summer residence, the Mount Brecon mansion in South Australia, had been gutted by fire just months before the voyage. The fire had been an accident caused by a plumber working in the roof. Alexandra and Dolly Hay survived the fire and boarded the Waratah for the journey home. They did not survive the Waratah. The following evening, at approximately 8:15, the SS Waratah sailed out of Durban with 211 passengers and crew. John Ebsworth was aboard. Alexandra Hay and her daughter were aboard. Captain Ilbery was at the helm. Claude Sawyer watched from the dock as the ship disappeared into the darkness of the Indian Ocean. None of them were ever seen again. Never. The steamship Waratah was built in 1908 by Barclay, Curle and Company at their Clydeholm Yard in Whiteinch, Glasgow. She was the pride of the Blue Anchor Line, a passenger and cargo steamship designed for the route between London, South Africa, and Australia. She was 465 feet long, displaced over 9,300 tons, and was fitted with 8 watertight compartments, 16 lifeboats, electric lighting, luxurious first-class cabins, a grand saloon, and a music room. She was, by the standards of 1908, a modern and impressive vessel. Lloyd's of London inspected her throughout design, construction, fitting out, and sea trials, and granted her their highest classification, plus 100 A1. That was the top rating, given only to ships that Lloyd's had assessed at every stage and found flawless. Her maiden voyage from London to Sydney and back was completed without serious incident, but not without concern. Several passengers on the maiden voyage reported that the Waratah rolled heavily in moderate seas. The rolling was deep and slow, the kind of motion that experienced travelers recognized as a sign of instability. A ship that rolls too far and recovers too slowly is a ship whose center of gravity is too high. It is, in maritime terminology, top-heavy. Top-heavy ships can capsize in conditions that would leave a properly balanced vessel untroubled. Claude Sawyer, the engineer, noticed this immediately. He was an experienced sea traveler who had crossed oceans many times. He knew what a ship should feel like in a swell, and the Waratah did not feel right. On the voyage from Australia to South Africa, he conducted his own informal experiment. He filled his bathtub and watched the water while the ship rolled. In a stable ship, the water in a bathtub shifts gently from side to side as the vessel moves. In the Waratah, Sawyer watched the bathwater slosh violently, climbing high up one side of the tub and then crashing to the other, confirming what his body had already told him. The ship was rolling too far, too slowly, and recovering too late. The bathtub told him what the ship's builders and owners refused to acknowledge. The Waratah was top-heavy, and a top-heavy ship, in the wrong sea, at the wrong angle, with the wrong wave, does not roll back. It keeps going. The name itself was cursed. The Waratah is a scarlet flower native to New South Wales, and 4 previous ships named after it had all met terrible ends. In 1848, a sailing ship named Waratah sank off Ushant with the loss of 13 lives. In 1887, 2 separate ships named Waratah sank off Sydney within months of each other. In 1889, another Waratah went down off Cape Preston in Western Australia, taking all hands. The name had killed before. Nobody thought to mention this when the new Waratah was christened. On April 27, 1909, the Waratah set out on her second voyage, departing London for Australia by way of the Cape of Good Hope. She carried 22 cabin passengers and 193 in steerage, along with a crew of 119 and a large cargo of general merchandise. The outward voyage was largely uneventful. She stopped at Cape Town, continued to Adelaide, Melbourne, and Sydney, where she loaded her return cargo: flour, wool, dairy products, frozen meat, 7,800 bars of bullion, and railway equipment. She also took on a convict being extradited to the Transvaal, accompanied by 2 South African police officers. The question of how much cargo the Waratah carried on her final voyage would later become one of the most contested details of the investigation. The Blue Anchor Line claimed she was carrying only a third of her capacity, roughly 3,000 tons. But the Australian manifests and witness accounts told a different story. On her maiden voyage, she had carried 9,800 tons. On her final voyage, witnesses and loading records suggested she was carrying between 10,000 and nearly 11,000 tons, far more than the owners admitted. If the ship was overloaded, her already questionable stability would have been catastrophically worsened. The owners had every reason to conceal this. They concealed it. The Waratah arrived in Durban on July 25th. Claude Sawyer got off. 211 people stayed on. At 8:15 in the evening of July 26th, the Waratah sailed from Durban bound for Cape Town, roughly 800 miles down the coast. The weather was fair when she departed. It would not stay that way. At approximately 4 in the morning on July 27th, the Waratah was sighted by the Clan MacIntyre, a passing steamer. The 2 ships exchanged lamp signals as was customary, identifying themselves and their destinations. The captain of the Clan MacIntyre later told the Board of Trade inquiry that the weather that day was the worst he had ever seen in 13 years at sea. Despite this, he said the Waratah appeared to be making easy going of the rising seas and was not listing or rolling unduly. The Waratah, being the faster ship, gradually pulled ahead of the Clan MacIntyre and disappeared over the horizon to the southwest at approximately 9:30 in the morning. This was the last confirmed sighting of the SS Waratah. there was one more possible sighting. That evening, at about 9:30, the steamer Guelph, heading north toward Durban, passed a vessel and exchanged lamp signals. Visibility was poor. The crew of the Guelph could make out only the last 3 letters of the ship's name, TAH, Waratah. If it was the Waratah, she was still afloat and still under power at 9:30 in the evening of July 27th. There was also the testimony of Edward Joe Conker, a member of the Cape Mounted Riflemen, who was participating in a military exercise near the mouth of the Hora River on the eastern Cape. Through a telescope, Conker observed a steamship matching the Waratah's description, struggling through heavy seas on a southwesterly course. He said he saw the vessel roll heavily to starboard, and before she could right herself, a massive following wave overwhelmed her. If Conker saw what he believed he saw, the Waratah capsized and sank in a single wave. And then there was Captain Bruce of the Harlow. His ship was traveling in the same waters, roughly 10 to 12 miles ahead of the Waratah. After darkness fell, Bruce could see the steamer's running lights behind him, slowly closing the distance. Then, at some point during the night, 2 bright flashes erupted from the direction of the Waratah's lights. The flashes could have been explosions, a boiler detonating, or the ship's cargo shifting and igniting. After the flashes, the lights vanished. Captain Bruce saw nothing more. But Bruce reported something else that night, something that has haunted the story of the Waratah for over a century. Some hours after exchanging signals with the Waratah, while standing alone on the bridge of the Harlow, Bruce saw another ship, a sailing vessel. There was something strangely old-fashioned about her rig. Bruce later said that the vessel immediately brought to mind the legend of the Flying Dutchman, the phantom ship that has been reported by sailors for centuries, always appearing before a disaster, always a harbinger of death. The phantom vessel, Bruce said, disappeared in the direction taken by the Waratah, and he had a feeling it was a sign of disaster for the liner. The Waratah was expected to reach Cape Town on July 29th. She did not arrive. At first, authorities assumed mechanical trouble. Her engines may have failed, and the ship was drifting. Vessels were dispatched to search the route between Durban and Cape Town. They found nothing. As the days passed, hope turned to despair, and then briefly, miraculously, back to hope. On August 4th, a cable arrived stating that the Waratah had been sighted, making slowly toward Durban, apparently under reduced power. The news reached the Australian Parliament during a session. The Speaker of the House stopped debate and read the cable aloud. Members sprang to their feet, cheering. In theaters across Melbourne, Adelaide, and Sydney, performances were halted so the joyous news could be announced to the audience. In Adelaide, the town bells were rung. Families wept with relief. Newspapers prepared special editions. The ship was not the Waratah. The sighting was wrong. The vessel that had been spotted was another steamer entirely, misidentified in poor conditions. The celebrations died as quickly as they had begun, replaced by a grief that was worse than the original despair, because it came after hope. Hope that is given and then taken away cuts deeper than hope that was never offered. In the weeks that followed, unconfirmed reports surfaced of bodies floating in coastal rivers near the eastern Cape, and of wreckage spotted offshore. The steamer in Sidswa reported seeing bodies off the Mbashi River on August 13th. None of the reports were verified. None of the bodies, if they existed, were recovered. The Indian Ocean had absorbed 211 people so completely that even the fragments the sea occasionally offered could not be confirmed as belonging to them. In September of 1909, the Blue Anchor Line chartered the Union Castle ship Sabine to search for the Waratah. The Sabine covered 14,000 miles of the Indian Ocean. She found nothing. In 1910, relatives of the passengers chartered the Wakefield and searched for 3 months. Nothing. The official Board of Trade inquiry opened in December of 1910 at Caxton Hall in London and lasted 14 months. The press described a group of women in deep mourning sitting behind the lawyers in the courtroom every day. Claude Sawyer testified. He described the dream. He said the dream showed a bloody swordsman, an armored figure on the water, and a rag soaked in blood. He described watching the water in his bathtub on the Waratah and noticing that it sloshed in a way that confirmed the ship was unstable, rolling far and recovering slowly. He described his attempts to warn others. He described getting off in Durban. The inquiry heard testimony from passengers on the maiden voyage, who confirmed that the Waratah rolled excessively. It heard from the ship's builders, who insisted the design was sound. It heard from Lloyd's, who confirmed their top rating. It heard from Captain Bruce of the Harlow, who described 2 bright flashes and the vanishing lights. And it heard from the Blue Anchor Line, who maintained that the ship was carrying only a fraction of her capacity. The inquiry concluded that the Waratah had capsized in heavy weather, probably overwhelmed by a large wave while already unstable. It did not establish a definitive cause. It could not. There were no survivors. There was no wreckage. There was no evidence of any kind, only testimony, theory, and 116 years of silence. Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, attempted to solve the mystery through a séance, trying to contact the spirits of the dead passengers. Whatever the spirits told him was not recorded for posterity. In the years after the disappearance, unverified reports surfaced of bodies and debris spotted in coastal rivers and offshore waters near the Eastern Cape. None were verified. Sightings of the Waratah herself were reported for years. All were false. The ship and everyone aboard her had vanished so completely that there was nothing left to find. Emlyn Brown, a South African marine explorer, dedicated over 20 years of his life to searching for the Waratah. Beginning in the late 1980s, Brown conducted multiple expeditions along the Eastern Cape coast, using sonar, magnetometers, and submersible cameras to scan the sea floor. The search was grueling. The waters off the Eastern Cape are deep, turbulent, and notoriously difficult to work in. The Agulhas Current, one of the strongest ocean currents in the world, runs along this coast, carrying warm water from the Indian Ocean southward at speeds that can overwhelm a ship's engines. The current also creates conditions where massive rogue waves can form without warning, waves over 20 meters high that have been documented by satellite imagery in this exact stretch of ocean. In 1999, Brown's team identified a potential wreck through sonar scans. The readings showed a large object on the seafloor at the right depth and in the right area, matching the expected dimensions of the Waratah. The discovery made international news. Brown believed he had found her, but subsequent dives and higher resolution scans could not confirm the identification. The object on the seafloor was too deep, too deteriorated, and too encrusted with marine growth to yield definitive proof. It might have been the Waratah. It might have been another wreck entirely. The seafloor off the Eastern Cape is littered with the remains of ships that have been sinking there for centuries. Brown continued searching until his efforts were eventually curtailed by funding constraints. He spent more than 2 decades looking for a ship that the Indian Ocean had swallowed in a single night. He never found her. As of 2026, the SS Waratah has never been found. No wreckage, no lifeboat, no body. No piece of debris that can be conclusively linked to the ship has ever been recovered from any beach, any river, or any stretch of ocean anywhere in the world. 211 people, including families, children, a convict, 2 police officers, a solicitor who had been warned to get off, and a woman from Coventry who had been told the ship was doomed and stayed anyway, boarded a vessel that the ocean swallowed so completely that it left no trace of itself behind. The Blue Anchor Line did not survive the loss. The company's reputation was destroyed by the inquiry, by the questions about overloading, and by the persistent rumors of instability that the owners had known about and concealed. The line ceased operations within a year. The company that had built the Waratah, Barclay Curle, continued building ships for decades. The ship that bore the name of a cursed flower, the fifth vessel to carry it, was the last. No one has named a ship Waratah since. Claude Sawyer lived. He carried the dream with him for the rest of his life. The figure on the water, the sword, the bloody rag, the knowledge that he had seen something coming and that no one had listened. He testified at the inquiry. He was questioned closely about whether his dream was genuine or whether he had invented it after the ship disappeared. A fellow passenger named Fred Saunders, who had also gotten off in Durban, later wrote that Sawyer had never mentioned any dreams while on board, and that he only spoke of them after learning the ship was missing. Whether Sawyer was a genuine visionary or an opportunist who crafted a good story after the fact is another question the Waratah has never answered. What is certain is that Claude Sawyer got off the ship in Durban, and 211 people did not. Whether he left because of a dream or because of a bathtub, or because of a feeling he could not explain, the result was the same. He lived, they died, and the ocean, which took the ship and everyone aboard it, has held them for 116 years and shows no sign of letting go. The SS Waratah is the biggest ship to have vanished completely before the Titanic. She is not the most famous, because the Titanic was found. The Waratah was not. She sits somewhere on the floor of the Indian Ocean, off the coast of South Africa, in water that no one has been able to search thoroughly enough to find her. 211 people are with her. The flower she was named after is scarlet, the color of blood. And Claude Sawyer's dream, whatever it was the last warning anyone received before the ocean closed over the Waratah and refused to speak of her again. If you want to hear the stories of what else the sea has taken and never returned, subscribe. There is always another ship that never came home.